Hello world and welcome to PyCon APAC 2020.
Welcome to PyCon APAC 2020.
Welcome to PyCon APAC 2020.
Welcome to PyCon 2020.
Welcome to PyCon APAC 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 2020.
Hello, welcome to PyCon APAC 2020.
Welcome to PyCon APAC 2020.
Welcome to PyCon APAC 2020, everyone.
Welcome to PyCon APAC 2020.
Welcome to PyCon APAC 2020. Cheers from Brazil and South America community.
Welcome to PyCon APAC 2020.
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 All right, let me get myself started here. Good. All right, set up. Good. Okay, I'll go into full screen mode and we will begin. All right, but we're backwards, so I'll leave myself in this mode so I can also see on the other screen. Let's have some fun. Thank you very much, PyCon APAC, for inviting me. Been really looking forward to this, looking forward to participating in the conference, but also looking forward to the story I get to tell about something that I'm really interested in. The web, static sites, and Sphinx. So I'm going to be talking about static sites with Sphinx and Markdown. I'm going to start with a position. Let's make Sphinx great for static websites. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. As introduction, I'm Paul Everitt. I'm developer advocate at JetBrains. I cover PyCharm and I cover WebStorm. Increasingly, I cover web stuff. And when I say I care about web stuff, what do I mean? Why does the web matter so much anymore? We've got these things that seem to matter a lot, and now watches that seem to matter a lot, and native apps that seem to matter a lot. But the web still is this wonderful invention of humanity where we all get to be equal and all get to enjoy and make content. And it's time to make the web really fantastic again. And when I say static websites, I also want to say that this is another technology that was very popular for a while and then became less popular. And as we see some things changing and some priorities, frankly, to include delivering the web to this, static sites have become a more important and valuable thing. And we're going to be talking about that in the context of what we're discussing today. In particular, when we say static websites, there is something that's kind of an old generation thing that has become a new generation thing, static site generator, SSG. And what do we mean by SSG? Well, we can go all the way back to this really old set of ideas about I want to make a blog and it's just a bunch of static pages and I'm going to use some really simple tool. Maybe I wrote it myself. But modern static site generators have become not just more sophisticated, not just more important, they become part of an architecture for a corporation to get its information out in the best form possible. When we talk about these static site generators and we talk about SSGs, the names that get thrown around for this are Jekyll, which is kind of connected a little bit to GitHub. So it's kind of the popular thing written in Ruby. Hugo, which is like the really mega fast one. It can build your sites really quickly. It's written in Go. And then the advent of things written in JavaScript on the server, 11D is a popular one because it's in JavaScript. It's easy to work with. Most people know JavaScript. It's a pretty simple SSG. And so there are so many of these static site generators. And I say 2 million others. Maybe there weren't 2 million at the start of this talk, but 5 minutes have passed. And so we've probably passed 2 million since then. When we go over and look into the world of Python, we have static site generators in the world of Python. Frankly, not quite as big as some of these other ones. Pelican is probably the most well-known, most used one. Really mature package, been through a lot of revisions, has a pretty good community behind it, a lot of add-ons and themes and things like that, attractive looking sites. Nikola is another one. Lektor is a fresh take on things that gets a little bit kind of into my world, which is content management systems. It has more of a content model, and thousands of others. It's Python. Everybody loves Python. It's easy to write these things, so people write their own static site generators. They write their own blog tools. But there's one that stands above all the others, so to speak, in the topic of this conversation, Gatsby. It's written in JavaScript. It's written basically in React, server-side and client-side React, and it's pitched as the tool for modern web. And this is a phrase that I've been using a lot lately. Modern web means things like very high performance website experiences with really modern techniques in the browser to speed up retrieval and display on mobile devices, on slow connections and things like that. Gatsby, I've been deep in Gatsby for the last 2 years. I've learned a lot about the problem it's solving and, frankly, the problems that it brings in trying to solve those problems. It's got me thinking a lot about these things. And it's got me thinking about Python and the modern web. I gave a keynote at a conference last year about this, gave a follow-on talk about it. Some others like Lucas Longa and Russell Keith McGee have given talks about this. Python. Yes, it's great for data science, but web is still important for the success of Python. And frankly, we're getting a little bit behind when it comes to modern web. We're doing things the way that we used to do them a long time ago. Things have changed. We need to learn a lot about how things are changing and what we can do differently. So that brings me to my dear old friend Sphinx. Been around, its namesake is appropriate, been around for a long time. It's been revised for a long time. It just as a project, it's just such a wonderful success story. Like every month or every couple of months, a new release comes out, and the maintainers of Sphinx just fix bugs and add features and just keep at it year over decade. It's wonderful to see a project like that, especially one that we all depend on so much for documentation. But that's not the topic of this talk. The topic of this talk is websites. And so that's a seed that I want to plant with you and follow up on a little bit later. What is it that really makes me excited about Sphinx? Especially in the context of my experience with Jekyll, my experience with Hugo, with Gatsby, looking at Pelican and looking at Nikola and Lektor and things like that. It still offers something that really makes my heart go. That's really wonderful to see. Structured content. All these other systems, if you put a link in your page and it points to another page in your site that doesn't exist, they don't know, they won't tell you because they don't really have any concept of structure. Their only goal is to generate HTML. They don't really try to make sense of the information. They're just worried about the presentation. Sphinx has forever and a day been really good at this. You plug pages into doc trees that plug into doc trees, and you have your entire site that is interconnected and references and links and stuff like that. And it makes for a powerful system beyond documentation for making almost like a knowledge base. And that's the thing that really interests me. But people don't really talk about Sphinx in those terms anymore. In fact, people talk about docs and they start talking about some other tools like Make Docs and things like that. What is it about Sphinx that really has caused people to think of it as in the past? First, in my opinion, is branding. Sphinx on the web page. says that it's for docs, for doing documentation. But it can be so much more than that. And docs are also part of a larger website and a larger presence, a larger information base. So we need to think about Sphinx a little bit differently. Second, and this is the biggest one by far, restructured text. Everyone thinks, oh, I got to go use that Python thing. I don't even know how to spell it, RST. Everyone else uses Markdown. Gosh, if I could just use Markdown, then maybe I would use Sphinx. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. Then two other things. It's kind of ugly. All the Sphinx themes, some of them do a little bit of work, but they all look like documentation sites. And finally, some of the machinery is a little bit outdated. I personally am working on these last 2 points, but today I'm just going to talk about the first two. Think of Sphinx as for websites and think of it as Markdown. What if we could get people to revisit Sphinx and get that powerful engine inside of it and use it with Markdown beyond docs for larger websites? And that is the topic of my talk. I'm going to switch over to show you some things inside the editor about adding Markdown to a Sphinx site and making a Sphinx site instead of docs, and talk a little bit about the configuration to get there. Then show some of the editing in Markdown, show some of the linking capabilities, and then come back to this presentation, talk a little bit more about some of the benefits. All right, just checking to see if we have any comments or anything like that. All right, good. So I'm going to switch over to, I'll switch first to Firefox and talk about Sphinx. This is the home page for Sphinx. Look, it tells you it's the Python documentation generator. So from a branding perspective, right out of the door, it's putting it into documentation, and I would like it to be thought of as all of your site. Very well done documentation, very well organized, getting started, going to the docs page. I've read these things so many times. Talks a little bit about developing extensions. It is a platform as well as a product, which means you can write extensions, plugins that add functionality in a pretty rich way. It has a multi-level build phase. It has an event system so you can register callbacks, all really good stuff. And should I mention an active community to answer any question you might have. Now, the secret. Markdown. Mist lets you write Sphinx entirely in Markdown. And that really is the justification for me being here to talk with you, is to get you to think a little bit differently about Sphinx, make it so that you could recommend it to your non-Python people. What the executable books team has done, the executable book project, what they've done with Mist is to let us write in Markdown, while keeping all of these great, powerful, frankly, non-Markdown kinds of things still being available, expressed in Markdown. Very, very good job at what they've done. I've spent a good bit of time writing a tutorial for this that I will publish next month. And the documentation explains a little bit about how it works. Just to give a little bit of a synopsis for the Python people that are familiar with Sphinx and restructured text. Restructured text is part of the docutils project. And docutils has a parser, and you can write custom parsers. There was never any reason that everything had to be in restructured text. It was just the only parser that was written. What if someone came along later and wrote another parser that could take as input Markdown? And that's what Mist has done. Very good to see this. Okay, we will begin. Let me get my notes out. All right, good. I'm going to switch over to, let's see, I'm going to switch over to my editor in PyCharm. And here is a Python project that I made with the virtual environment. And I went ahead and installed some packages in advance. I installed Sphinx. I installed this Mist thing that lets me do Markdown. And then we'll talk about this live reload thing in a second. And with this in my virtual environment, I was able to run the generator to build new Sphinx projects called Sphinx Quick Start. And it asks you some questions. What's the name of your project? What's the copyright? Who's the author? And things like that. And so I went ahead and did that, generated a site, and it's got a Sphinx configuration file, which I simplified a little bit. I will go over some of this. I'll try to balance this between people who are somewhat familiar with Sphinx and people who are a little bit new to Sphinx. In Sphinx, you can add extensions through Python packages. And so right now I've registered one Sphinx extension, which is from the package called Mist, the Mist parser package. And I've added a few little knobs that are unique to Mist so I can get some special powers from the Mist Markdown. So with that in place, I'm able to go to what was before index.rst and instead now is index.md, Markdown. I'm writing a Sphinx site in Markdown. And so before, when it was restructured text, I might have had the title with underlines and maybe put that on top. And that was the way in restructured text that you would express the title of a document. Well, in Markdown, you have headings and then you have subheadings, and I'm now using Markdown, which means so many Markdown previewers out there, I can see a preview of some of the Markdown that I'm writing, which is one of the big wins for this. All right, so with this in place, this talk tree, I'll come back and talk about it in a bit. What I want to do is go to showing some of the, well, actually, I'll run this. Go back to here. That live reload thing that I brought up, a lot of these other static site generators like Jekyll and Hugo and Gatsby for sure, they have these little servers so that authors, as they're writing, can sit in a web browser and preview their site live. I type some stuff, I save, it does a rebuild, and the browser reloads the page automatically. I don't have to go over to the browser and hit reload. So this live reload package is a Python package that lets you simulate some of that. I'm going to go ahead and run live reload, and it's started. And I'll click on this link to bring up my little site. It's written in Sphinx, but it's written in Markdown. Let me prove that to you by saying my APAC site. Okay, I wasn't on the correct page when I did the reloading. So with that in mind, I could go and remove this, save, it reruns Sphinx, and I get to see automatically without reloading my page. And then now I can go through some of these Markdown conventions. Okay, I'll close this, and I will go to page 1. Let's talk about some of the things you can do now in Markdown with Sphinx. So you don't have to learn that weirdo restructured text syntax. I can write a page with a paragraph and another paragraph. And I get generated in my output the P tags for HTML. I can do italics with a single asterisk. And then I can do bold with double asterisks. I get to see over here a preview because Markdown is so popular. I have lots of preview tools out there. I could change this to italics, hit reload or save, and it automatically builds, and I have italics. I'll put that back the way it was. Little bit more on formatting. I have what in restructured text would be a double tick to make this into a code block. And when I say code, I mean that. In Markdown, it's a single tick, and that generates code. That generates a code tag here. I want to be careful about saying generate a code tag. Any of you who know Sphinx know that I'm telling a little bit of a lie here. I'm not really generating a HTML code tag. What I'm really doing is generating this abstract representation called a doc tree. Think of it a little bit like an XML structure. Why does Sphinx do that? Because Sphinx can also generate PDF. It can generate man pages, LaTeX, EPUB, HTML help, all kinds of help systems. You can write your own builders to generate other kinds of output. And so it needs this abstract representation so that I could generate a PDF version of my entire site. That is something that Eleventy and Jekyll and Hugo and Gatsby can't do. So that's a pretty cool thing. So when I say that I'm generating a HTML code tag, I just mean for the HTML builder. Internally, I'm generating some abstract node called a code node or something like that. I can have longer pre-formatted text inside triple backticks, also known as a code fence in Markdown. I can do indented text, 1 level of indent, 2 levels of indent, etc. I can do bulleted lists. Markdown's bulleted lists are more convenient than restructured text. In restructured text, first I would have to put a space in between these, and if it wrapped in Markdown, that's legal. But in restructured text, I would have to do that indentation. That's no fun. Markdown definitely beats restructured text on that. You can do numbered lists, and then on into links. And just to be perfectly clear, this really is the magic that I'm interested in, is Sphinx, the rich content, rich organization schemes that you can get in Sphinx. A very simple link. I'm just linking to an external site, python.org. And then this is the text of the link. Anybody that's familiar with Markdown knows, probably does this over and over and over. So this is the text that will appear. Internal links. If I'm linking to, for example, I'm on page 1 in my site. If I want to link to the index page, I can just say index and then put what I want for the label there. I don't have to put a URL, relative path, or anything like that. Even if I was 3 levels deep, Sphinx would figure out the path to get to that document because it is a system for all the connections in your site. It knows where everything is. So that's cool. This, I wonder if everybody can really understand and appreciate the value of what's going on here. This site's welcome to my site. That's the link text. I didn't type welcome to my site inside this text. How did it know that was what to put inside the link? Because unlike the other systems, Sphinx loads the information model of your entire site, and it knows the title of the document at index. In fact, if I went back and changed this again, let's see. Oh, I need to do just something to trigger a little bit of a rebuild. Then it's updated the title because the destination's title changed. This is the entry into all kinds of awesome goodness. I'll continue. Headings, just like you would expect in Markdown, 2 hashes means a H2, 3 means an H3, etc. Sphinx has always been really good at images. So are the other systems like Gatsby and things like that. In Markdown, this is what you would expect. The URL to an image, for example, python logo.pmg. and then the alt text, and then this little thing in front, which says the thing after me isn't a link, it's an image. What if I have a local image? Then I don't put a URL. I put something that looks like a file name or a path, do exactly the same thing. But behind the scenes, Sphinx is, again, converting this into docutils, the whole restructured text and Sphinx tree, and it's treating it as if I did a restructured text image. It's going to make a copy of the image, run it through Pill to improve it, and copy it to the output, and then it's going to fix up the link to point to the file, the image file that it generated. And so that's really useful. If you want more, because all I get to put here is the name of the file and the alt. What if I want to have like the width and to say it's centered and do a couple of other things? Mist, which is the Markdown bridge for Sphinx, lets you tap into directives in Sphinx. Directives are those things in Sphinx that would have been like, dot, code block or whatever, image, and do them in a Markdown friendly syntax. So this is exactly the same as doing the restructured text directive for an image. And then I get to supply extra options to tell this image to be bigger and to be centered, which is quite cool. Let's go onward past images to code snippets. If you're writing a site, particularly about technology, a lot of times you're going to want to put snippets of code. Markdown has long had a syntax for it with these code fences, and Mist and Sphinx support that. Remember that Sphinx has its own code block and literal include directives. We just need to give a Markdown syntax to use that. And with this, I'm generating a code block in Sphinx. And since I didn't specify a language, Python is the default language. Its syntax highlights it as Python. If, though, I wanted to provide a JavaScript snippet, all I need to do is, as the argument to this code block, say that this is JavaScript. And it would have been the same in restructured text as code block JavaScript. And then indented and the code block itself with possibly some options. And I'm typing that out as a reminder. Behind the scenes, this is doing the same thing as if you had used restructured text. And in fact, with Mist, you can keep all of your site in restructured text and add just one Markdown document. Or have everything in Markdown and have just one restructured text. Both parsers, Markdown and restructured text, are available at the same time. To show why this is important about using the underlying code block has some cool things in it, like emphasizing 2 lines in the output, lines 2 and line 3. If I'm writing a code snippet and then it changes and I want people to only have to look at one thing, I can use emphasized lines to point them at the right place. These are code blocks where the code is in the Markdown document. What if, and this is the way I like to work, what if my code is outside? So for example, I showed you the configuration file. I don't want to have to copy and paste this into my Markdown document because inevitably I'll change it and forget to paste it. Literal include lets you point at a file on disk using any of the supported languages, and you can also pass arguments to it, pass options to it. This is a place where some of these other systems struggle. I know in Gatsby, I really struggle with this combined with the equivalent of literal include. I was in it today struggling with it. One more thing that is useful in Sphinx is this thing called admonitions. So you're in the middle of your text and you're explaining something to someone. Hey, watch out. This doesn't work where you think it works. You can do a warning and it will generate something like this. And if I wanted it to be, instead of a warning, I wanted it to just be a note, I could do that. And it changes the color a little bit, several other things that I can do there. And in PDF, it will also give a nice little block like that, because behind the scenes, this is all semantic. Notice that the body of this directive is actually Markdown. So I've got only as italics, and I've got a link to the Python homepage, and then I have a bulleted list. Now, what I don't really get is, look over here in my preview. This isn't rendering as Markdown because of the way this code fencing thing works. And so I don't really get a good preview. Well, the Mist people have thought of this, and that's what this configuration flag lets you do, is a special syntax for Markdown with, instead of triple backticks, triple colons, and then everything else is basically the same, except the body now renders. So I could make this into a bold and get a nice little preview over here, and then save it, and then I'll see that this is a bold. So that's an example of Mist. As it matures and adds extra development features, it's giving you important things. Another thing that I use a lot in Sphinx is the ability to use the download directive to point at a file that I want to be made available for download. So this is an image, but it's not being displayed in the page. I want it to be available for download. Like many other things in Mist, you can supply your own text while putting the file name in brackets, in greater than, less than. Lots more that I could talk about regarding the linking capabilities of this. You can in Sphinx, and therefore in Markdown, I can say for a heading that this has a link target, and then some other page can link not to this page, but to that heading. And back in index, we have the talk tree. I've got it currently as a glob, but if I change that from a glob and I say that page 1 is in my site, save, everything runs okay down here. But what if, let's see, what if over here, I'm doing my linking to index, but I actually mistype it and say index. Every other system out there would happily build, and you would never know that you had a broken link on your site. Sphinx, though, knows that we have a reference target somewhere. Actually, in this document, on line 34, I have a link to a target that wasn't found. So as you're making your site, and as you accidentally link to something, or if you move something, or if you rename a file, Sphinx will let you know that you've got a problem with a dead link or an orphan link, and that's all pushed up into the Markdown syntax. People who know Markdown, who don't yet know all of this Sphinx power, will just get it for free. All right, lots more I could show on that. I could talk about InterSphinx for linking between sites. I could talk about building PDF. I'm going to do all of this in my tutorial, my video and text tutorial next month. I'll go back over to closing remarks. So why Sphinx? Out of all the things that I could come to PyCon APAC and talk about, why would I talk about Sphinx? It's like the world moved on and I didn't get the memo. Well, I still think there's something really valuable in Sphinx, and I want to keep working on this because some of these things are valuable and aren't available elsewhere. Making your site as a PDF or as an EPUB book is a valuable thing to an important set of people. And so many of these features, linking and contents and images and all of that just works. I just showed broken links. This frustrates me. It's crazy that these other systems don't even know the structure of your site. Being able to link to a page and have the title of that page be used as the link text in the source of the link is a really valuable feature. Being able to link down to a heading or even into a class method using a handy syntax that repairs itself as things get renamed, that's really helpful. On to the kind of bigger things. Having a knowledge base where all of your information is well organized, interlinked, richly linked, and you can add custom directives and roles that express your ideas in your business domain and entities as a platform is another really powerful thing. I hope that there's another generation of Sphinx coming for modern web, for modern websites, for knowledge bases, beyond documentation. I hope that we can make Python and web exciting again. All right, I will stop there and take any questions. Yes, Pelican. Alphonsus, that's a good point because I admire good projects as much as good code. And looking at what Justin and the others have done with Pelican over the years, it's a little bit like looking at the Sphinx changelog. Lots of little details getting fixed, getting improved year over year over year. It's exciting to see. I will say this though, Pelican and in my opinion, Jekyll and Hugo and all these other things, they started to make a blog. They started to make your first 5 minutes successful. I'm interested in richer systems that make your next 5 years successful, if that makes any sense. Please follow up with me if you disagree with me on that point. I'd like to see your points on that. That's a good point. In my tutorial, so the question is, what about tables? They seem to work well for HTML, but generating to PDF that they don't work as well. Nicholas, I'll ask you a question back. Are you going through LaTeX to get to PDF? Because if so, I've been looking at a different builder called Rhino. Let me go back to my no, I don't have it installed in this one. There's another builder that advertises generating PDF directly, so you don't have to go through LaTeX to get to it. Do me a favor. I'll type it right here. Here's my email address. Send me an email with the restructured text that you're having a problem with, and I'm going to run it through this other PDF builder and see if it does a better job. So if you could send me an example of something that doesn't work well, I'd like to see more on that. And please, any questions for people who think I'm crazy? Oh, there's a question on the comments. All right. Okay, yes. All right. Everyone, please keep an eye on the PyCharm blog and a special surprise you'll have hopefully in October on another place for it when I put out my 10-part tutorial on static sites with Sphinx and Markdown. Okay, I believe that's all the questions we have. I will stick around for a little bit longer and see if any other questions come in. Thank you very much for letting me come and talk about this topic. And I appreciate it. Reach out to me with any questions, any comments, any criticisms. I'll take that as well. Thank you very much for having me.
One of the most notable points is trying an online conference for the first time. We were not able to use the manual and knowledge of previous offline conferences. We had to identify what we needed to do for the online conference. We faced various issues during the preparation, but we didn't give up holding an online conference. We kept on communicating with each other and helping each other.
それでは、ただいまより PyConJP2020 始めたいと思います。
So let's begin PyConJP 2020.
よろしくお願いします。ありがとうございます。まずは PyConJP2020 への参加、本当にありがとうございます。
Thank you all for coming to PyConJP 2020.
Python で遊ぼうコンピューター将棋2020というタイトルで、発表させていただきます。柴と申します。
Now, what is the Python community?
Python ではこの pattern
when visualizing scientific results.
If you look into this a bit more closely,
広島県の場所を確認しましょう。
Anti-gravity and everything starts flying.
PyTest ベンチマークで PyTest が運用使った。
Before I explain about Python software, I'm gonna
PyConJP 2020 was very challenging. This is the first time online conference for organizers. We were really anxious whether we can get sponsored. In spite of such tough situation, we could get many sponsors this year.
Free software, Python, open source, all of us, we have an excellent history of international collaboration. I don't know of any organization in the world that has done a better job than the leaderless system of free software development.
ゴールデンウィークとか夏休みとか覚えてないですかね。
ゴールデンウィークは初めてやってます。
ゲームやったんですね。じゃあ自宅でステイホームを楽しんだって感じ。
何やってたのか記憶になくて。
皆さん本当にご参加ありがとうございました。また来年 PyConJP2021 でお会いしましょう。
Again, thank you all so much for joining us till the end this year, and we are looking forward to welcome you again next year at PyConJP 2021.
ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all members of conference. Everything was challenging for everyone to have such scale conference online.
I saw many people around Python, participants, speakers, sponsors, partners, staff members who loved Python and supported the conference even in such a tough year. Seeing these topics and people, I've realized again that Python has a strong power and will progress further and further.